Have you ever noticed that the moment things finally feel safe, the avoidant disappears? It's one of the most confusing experiences in relationships, that sudden emotional drop right after intimacy begins to bloom. Everything seems fine. There's laughter, shared vulnerability, the walls seem to lower. And then, without warning, they withdraw. They stop replying, they grow cold, they make excuses about being busy. It feels like rejection, but to the avoidant, it feels like survival. Avoidantly attached individuals don't pull away because they've stopped caring. They pull away because caring too much terrifies them. Closeness, for them, doesn't register as comfort, it registers as danger. The very thing they crave, emotional intimacy, also activates their deepest fear, the loss of autonomy, the fear of being consumed, controlled, or emotionally dependent. So when they begin to feel close, something inside them starts to panic. Their mind whispers, "You're losing yourself. You're getting too close. You need to retreat." To the person on the other end, this retreat feels personal, like betrayal or abandonment. But for the avoidant, it's not about punishment. It's about regulation. Emotional proximity triggers an old survival response. Their nervous system mistakes safety for vulnerability and vulnerability for threat. And so they do what they've always done to survive emotional intensity. They distance. This is why their behavior feels inconsistent. One day, they're open and warm. The next, they're unreachable. But underneath that contradiction is one consistent truth. They're terrified of needing someone. Because to need someone, in their emotional logic, means giving up control. And for an avoidant, control is safety. Yet the irony is that the moment they pull away is usually the moment they care most. The distance isn't a sign that connection failed. It's a sign that it worked. They felt something real. And real, for them, feels unbearable. If you've ever wondered why someone withdraws right after opening up, why the warmth turns cold the second it feels close, it's not rejection you're witnessing. It's fear disguised as indifference. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. For most people, emotional closeness feels like safety. For the avoidant, it feels like exposure, like standing in bright light with nowhere to hide. They crave love, but fear being seen too clearly. Because to be seen means being known, and to be known means being vulnerable. And vulnerability, in their emotional blueprint, has never felt safe. Avoidants often grew up in environments where emotions were overwhelming, inconsistent, or dismissed altogether. Maybe affection was rare, or love came with conditions. Be good, be quiet, don't need too much. So they learned to equate closeness with danger. They built an emotional armor that says, "If I don't depend on anyone, I can't be hurt." But that armor, while protective, also keeps love at arm's length. When someone begins to get close, truly close, the avoidance defenses start firing. They don't consciously think, "I'm afraid." Instead, they start to feel restless, irritable, suffocated. They might find faults in the other person, become critical, or suddenly crave solitude. These aren't random mood swings. They're the body's way of saying, "We're too exposed. Pull back." What looks like coldness is often self-preservation. Inside, the avoidant feels overwhelmed by the idea of being emotionally needed. Their autonomy feels threatened, their sense of control slipping away. Even tenderness, something small, like someone reaching for their hand, can trigger unease because it reminds them of the dependency they've spent their whole life avoiding. So they create distance to breathe, to regain control, to calm the rising panic that comes with emotional visibility. Yet that very act, the withdrawal, reinforces their inner loneliness. They end up confirming the belief that closeness always leads to discomfort and distance always leads to peace. It's a tragic cycle. Every time they feel something real, they retreat. Every time they retreat, they feel more alone. And what hurts most is that the avoidant rarely understands this pattern while it's happening. They tell themselves they just need space or that the connection doesn't feel right. But underneath those rationalizations lies a much simpler truth. They're scared of being loved in a way that could actually reach them. At the heart of the avoidance withdrawal lies one core fear: losing themselves inside someone else. To most people, love means merging, becoming close, sharing, intertwining lives. But for the avoidant, merging feels like erasure. It threatens the fragile sense of independence that has always been their emotional anchor. They've built an identity on self-reliance, often out of necessity. Somewhere in their past, they learned that needing others meant disappointment. Maybe their emotions were too much for someone. Maybe their vulnerability was met with rejection or withdrawal. Whatever the story, the message stuck. If I depend on anyone, I'll lose control. If I let someone in, I'll disappear. So when intimacy begins to deepen, their body remembers that old fear. The warmth of connection starts to feel like heat that burns instead of soothes. The more they sense emotional closeness, the stronger the impulse becomes to reclaim space. It's not that they don't want love, they just want to love safely, in a way that doesn't threaten their independence. Unfortunately, that safety often comes at the cost of connection itself. When you're close to an avoidant, you'll notice this tension in subtle ways. They might joke about needing freedom, cancel plans right after a deep conversation, or go quiet after a moment of intimacy. It's not random. It's the moment their subconscious decides, I'm getting too close. Time to protect myself. They don't want to hurt you, but the fear of emotional engulfment overrides everything else. Ironically, the closer they feel to someone, the more they fear losing that connection. Because closeness means stakes. Stakes mean potential pain. And for the avoidant, pain tied to love feels unbearable. They would rather sabotage the bond than risk being powerless within it. This is why the avoidant often confuses peace with distance. When they withdraw, the anxiety quiets down, but so does the warmth. They mistake that calm for emotional clarity, but it's really just relief from their own fear. And that temporary relief becomes addictive. It's the only form of safety they trust, even when it costs them the very thing they want most: to be loved without losing themselves. The avoidant lives in quiet contradiction. They want closeness, deeply, painfully, sincerely, but the moment they feel it, their system starts sounding alarms. Love activates both longing and panic. It's like standing at the edge of a beautiful ocean and wanting to swim, yet fearing that the waves will pull you under. That's what connection feels like to them. Irresistible, but dangerous. Inside, two forces are constantly at war. One says, I want to be seen. The other whispers, if they see too much, they'll leave. One part of them wants to be held. Another part wants to escape before it happens. This internal tug-of-war is what makes their relationships so confusing. They can be tender and affectionate one day, detached and distant the next. Both sides are real. Both are sincere. But one is ruled by fear. What's hard for others to grasp is that avoidance isn't about arrogance or indifference. It's about protection. The avoidant protects their emotional core as if it were fragile glass. They believe that letting someone close means giving them power to hurt them. And because the pain of rejection or engulfment feels intolerable, they preemptively withdraw. To them, distance equals control, and control equals survival. But something tragic happens within this logic. Every time they choose distance, they also choose isolation. They confirm their deepest fear, that closeness always leads to pain, without realizing they're the ones creating that pain through avoidance itself. The loneliness they feel becomes self-inflicted, but they don't yet see it. All they know is that closeness feels like chaos, and solitude feels like safety. This conflict creates cycles of push and pull. They'll reach out when loneliness becomes unbearable, and retreat again when connection becomes too intense. The people who love them get caught in that rhythm, always reaching, always waiting, never understanding that what feels like rejection is actually regulation. But even in their withdrawal, the avoidant doesn't stop caring. They think about you when they're gone. They replay moments in silence, wondering why something so good suddenly felt so wrong. They feel the ache too, but they've learned to soothe it with distance, not dialogue. Because for them, staying safe has always mattered more than staying close. There's something paradoxical about what triggers the avoidant most: consistency. The very stability most people crave can feel suffocating to someone with an avoidant attachment style. When you're calm, patient, and emotionally available, you might think you're making them feel safe. But to the avoidant, that steadiness can actually feel like pressure. Why? Because consistency means predictability, and predictability implies permanence. Permanence, for the avoidant, equals dependency, the very thing they fear most. The moment they sense someone is here to stay, they begin to feel trapped in a role they never consciously agreed to. Even healthy love can start to feel like obligation. They begin to wonder, what if I disappoint them? What if I can't give enough? What if this closeness starts to own me? So when you offer stability, they instinctively create distance. It's not rebellion, it's self-preservation. That withdrawal is their nervous system trying to restore a sense of control. They might start arguments over small things, pull back communication, or retreat into silence. Anything to reestablish emotional space. To them, space equals safety, even if it breaks your heart. The avoidant doesn't realize that the consistency you offer isn't a trap, it's an invitation. But because they've never known love without pressure, they can't distinguish steadiness from suffocation. Their mind tells them, this is too much closeness, when what they're actually feeling is unfamiliar safety. This is often when partners start to doubt themselves. You think you did something wrong. You wonder if you came on too strong or said too much. But it's rarely about that. The avoidant is reacting not to you, but to what you represent: emotional stability, something they've secretly craved yet never felt safe receiving. Ironically, the more real and secure the connection becomes, the stronger their fear grows. Because safety is foreign. It stirs up everything they've buried. The memories of being let down, misunderstood, unseen. Stability forces them to confront the truth that maybe they've been protecting themselves from ghosts that no longer exist. But awareness doesn't come easily. In the moment, they only feel the impulse to flee. What they can't see is that they aren't running from love. They're running from the possibility that love might finally reach them. For the avoidant, there's a moment in every connection where things shift, when love stops being theoretical and becomes real. It's not about grand gestures or declarations. It's about quiet moments. The way you look at them without expectation, the softness in your voice when they're distant, the calm presence you hold when they can't meet you emotionally. That's when something inside them stirs. And that's also when fear begins to take over. When love feels real, it threatens the delicate balance they've built between connection and control. Up to that point, they can manage affection, flirt, connect, even open up a little, without losing their emotional footing. But the moment they start to feel deeply, everything changes. Their defenses start to crack, and underneath them lies a fear they've spent a lifetime avoiding. What if I depend on you, and you leave? So they pull back, not because you've done something wrong, but because they've reached their emotional limit. Vulnerability, to them, feels like surrender, and surrender feels like danger. They might suddenly seem cold, detached, or even irritated by the very intimacy they once initiated. What you experience as rejection is actually panic wearing a mask of indifference. This is the paradox of the avoidant. They long for real connection but fear it more than anything. They crave love that feels safe, but the moment it arrives, it exposes their deepest wounds. Love reminds them of everything they've buried, the moments they felt unseen, the years they learned to survive alone, the heartbreak that taught them distance was safer than devotion. When they feel too close, their instincts shout retreat. It's their body's attempt to return to emotional balance, to the only safety they know, which is solitude. But deep inside, even as they pull away, they're conflicted. They think about you. They miss the peace you brought. Yet they feel compelled to prove to themselves that they can live without it, that they're still in control. And so, the very connection that could heal them becomes the one they fear most. Because to stay, to remain open, would mean letting someone love the parts of them they've spent a lifetime hiding. For the avoidant, control isn't just a preference, it's a coping mechanism. It's how they keep their emotional world intact. Control tells them they can't be hurt, can't be rejected, can't be overwhelmed. But the tragedy is that this illusion of control is exactly what keeps them from experiencing the love they secretly crave. When an avoidant feels emotionally activated, when things start to get too close, their first instinct is to regain power over their own vulnerability. That can look like silence, distance, or sudden withdrawal. They may stop initiating contact, become less expressive, or shift into logic and analysis as a way to cool the emotional intensity. These behaviors aren't calculated, they're automatic. It's how they calm the storm inside. They don't realize that the act of pulling away doesn't actually give them control. It just gives them loneliness disguised as safety. They tell themselves they're fine alone, that they just need space. And for a while, they believe it. But after the initial relief fades, the silence becomes heavy. That's when the confusion sets in. Because deep down, they miss the closeness they pushed away. Yet reaching for it again feels dangerous. The avoidance mind often runs a quiet narrative in these moments. If I need you, I'll lose myself. If I lose myself, I'll get hurt. But if I stay distant, I'll be alone. It's a painful logic loop, one that keeps them oscillating between desire and defense. The need for control is really a need for emotional safety, but the methods they use to feel safe are the same ones that keep them isolated. This is why avoidants often seem unpredictable. They might withdraw one week and reappear the next, not because they're playing games, but because they're trying to balance two unbearable truths: their fear of being hurt and their fear of being alone. Control becomes their way of surviving that tension. But love, by nature, can't be controlled. It requires surrender, trust, and mutual vulnerability. All the things the avoidant has learned to associate with pain. So they grip harder, micromanaging their emotions, rationing affection, convincing themselves that emotional distance equals strength. Yet in the quiet moments, when the texts go unanswered, when the nights feel too long, the illusion cracks. They realize control hasn't protected them. It has only kept them safe from the very thing they need most: connection. For the avoidant, distance isn't punishment. It's peace. It's the one place where they can breathe without feeling the weight of someone else's expectations. After withdrawing, they often feel an immediate sense of relief, a quiet calm that tells them, "I'm safe again." That relief reinforces everything they believe about closeness, that intimacy equals pressure, and pressure equals danger. This is the cruel comfort of avoidance. The silence feels soothing, but it's a false peace, one built on avoidance rather than resolution. Inside that calm, the avoidance emotional system is recovering from overstimulation. Their body relaxes, their thoughts slow, their anxiety fades. It feels like clarity, but what it really is absence. The absence of emotional risk, the absence of connection, the absence of love. They convince themselves that this distance is clarity. See, I'm fine without them. I just needed space. And yet, as days pass, small cracks appear in that certainty. Their mind starts wandering back, replaying moments, remembering softness, feeling echoes of what they pushed away. That peace begins to blur with emptiness. Because while distance protects them from discomfort, it also denies them warmth. Avoidants rarely understand that their version of safety is actually a symptom of fear. They confuse emotional numbness for stability. They believe being unbothered means being strong. But strength isn't the absence of feeling. It's the capacity to stay present with it. And that's the one thing the avoidant hasn't learned to do. When they feel too close, they retreat to reset. But in that solitude, they start to miss what they've escaped. They'll scroll through old messages, think about your voice, maybe even consider reaching out. But then the same fear that made them pull away whispers, "Don't ruin the peace you just regained." And so they stay quiet, trapped in the paradox they can't escape, craving connection but clinging to distance. It's in this tension, this emotional limbo, that the avoidant begins to feel the weight of their pattern. Because no matter how peaceful the distance feels at first, it always ends the same way, with loneliness that feels strangely familiar, the kind they once mistook for safety. After the avoidant pulls away, there comes a quiet moment, days or weeks later, when the silence they once cherished starts to ache. The relief fades, the peace turns hollow, and suddenly, the emptiness they mistook for control begins to feel like loss. This is the part they never talk about, the part where distance doesn't feel like freedom anymore. It feels like absence. They start thinking about the warmth they turned away from, the laughter they silenced, the safety they couldn't trust. They may not admit it, but they miss you. They miss what it felt like to be cared for without having to earn it. But because avoidants struggle with emotional visibility, that longing rarely turns into confession. They won't say, "I miss you." They'll just check your profile, think of you at random hours, or find small excuses to reappear, subtly, carefully, so they don't feel exposed. Regret is a complicated emotion for them. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, internal, often buried beneath logic. They'll tell themselves it wasn't the right time, that the connection wasn't meant to be, that distance was necessary. But beneath those rationalizations lies a truth they can't fully escape. They pushed away something they actually wanted. Avoidants don't mean to hurt others or themselves, but their emotional defense system is faster than their reflection. By the time they realize what they've done, the damage is already felt. And because they struggle with vulnerability, repair becomes nearly impossible. They want to reach out, but the thought of explaining their fear feels unbearable. So they stay silent, choosing pride over exposure. And yet, silence doesn't bring closure. It only deepens the regret. Because what they're really mourning isn't the person they lost. It's the version of themselves that almost let love in. For a fleeting moment, they were seen and safe at the same time. That feeling haunts them. This is the quiet truth about avoidance. Behind every withdrawal is not indifference, but fear. And behind that fear, there's a longing to be loved without the terror of losing oneself. The avoidant's greatest pain isn't that they can't connect. It's that they do, and then destroy it in order to survive. The avoidant doesn't heal by finding the perfect partner who never triggers them. They heal when they finally recognize the pattern, when they stop mistaking distance for safety and silence for strength. Healing begins the moment they understand that closeness doesn't have to cost them their identity. That love, when it's healthy, doesn't consume, it expands. For someone with avoidant attachment, emotional safety has always meant control. But real safety is different. It's the ability to stay open even when afraid, to remain present even when the urge to retreat is strong. It's learning that autonomy and connection can coexist, that love doesn't demand the loss of self, only the sharing of it. The journey toward healing isn't dramatic, it's subtle. It looks like pausing before pulling away, like saying, "I need space, but I still care," like allowing someone to see the discomfort instead of hiding it. These are small acts, but each one rewires the old belief that vulnerability equals danger. Over time, these moments create a new kind of internal safety, one rooted not in avoidance, but in trust. And for the partners of avoidance, understanding is powerful, but boundaries are essential. You can't love someone out of their fear, and you shouldn't shrink to fit their comfort. The healthiest thing you can do is stay grounded in your own emotional center, compassionate, but not consumed. Because true connection can't be built on chasing. It's built on steadiness, respect, and space for growth. The truth is, avoidance isn't the absence of love. It's love tangled in fear. Beneath all the distance and control lies a heart that's simply terrified of needing what it never learned to trust. But when awareness enters the picture, when the avoidant starts to see that running only deepens the wound, something remarkable happens. The walls begin to soften. They start to reach back, slowly, uncertainly, but genuinely. And that's where healing begins, not in perfect closeness, but in imperfect courage. The courage to stay, to speak, to try again, to let love in, not as a threat, but as proof that they are finally safe enough to feel. If this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more, and repost to help others understand the quiet world of avoidance and the hope that lies beyond it.